This male lead is so bizarre. He was just transported to another world by a truck, so he decided to take sleeping pills. He's ready to die again. This completely dumbfounded the goddess who summoned him. She quickly cast an antidote spell on him, but unexpectedly, he didn't appreciate it. Instead, he accused her of doing something unnecessary. It turned out he was a severe sufferer of UU syndrome. Originally, he planned to commit suicide with his girlfriend, but unexpectedly, they had only just tied the rope connecting their hands. He was hit and killed by a sudden truck. Although it was unexpected, it wasn't a bad way to die. But now it seems he didn't die. Saying that, he continued taking his drugs. Seeing this, the goddess was speechless. No matter what, you are the hero who saves the world. How can you be so self-destructive? Speaking of which, the goddess finally remembered she hadn't introduced the male lead yet. That truck was actually an interdimensional transporter. Anyone who had an unhappy life in their original world would be chosen by those trucks. Then they would start a new life in another world. And since the truck came to pick you up, it proves you were unhappy in your original world. But it's okay. You're different now than before. Now you are the hero of this world, so you should be happy now. At these words, the male lead couldn't sit still anymore. He immediately went before the goddess. So that was your doing. Thanks to that broken truck, his happiest moment of life has been interrupted. To arbitrarily decide whether someone is unhappy or not is arrogant, even by my standards. Even the goddess was stunned by this statement. She thought to herself, this guy's quite a character. But it doesn't matter anymore. Just let him see his own attribute panel. Then he should quickly change his mind. Because everyone who is transferred to this world, without exception, will be granted the qualification of superhuman powers. However, that's true. But when the goddess really saw the male lead's panel, she was dumbfounded. Not only are all the attributes single digits, but more importantly, he's still poisoned. She clearly remembers she removed the poison just now. Could it be that he doesn't have long to live? That shouldn't be the case. The incredulous goddess switched the attribute panel to skills, but the result was still nothing. She never expected the hero summoned this time to be such a weakling. She had never heard of such a thing before. Then the male lead coughed a few times, and wanted to leave. Seeing this, the goddess immediately stepped forward to stop him, saying that it was indeed her mistake. So without great power, it's difficult to survive in this world. Hearing this, the male protagonist showed a hint of disdain, because this is exactly his life. He is merely seeking a way to die. He left without looking back. The goddess watched him leave. At this moment, the goddess's heart began to beat rapidly, because the person before her was different from other time travelers. She used to be quite proud of guiding adventurers at her care. But as more and more people came to her, she didn't know when it started, but she became a woman who only repeated fixed lines to the heroes. That's how it should have been, yes. But this man was different. Hearing this, the goddess finally snapped back to reality. At this moment, she finally understood. She had been waiting for someone like the male lead all along. Meanwhile, the male lead had arrived at a fork in the road. Just as he didn't know which way to go, a tree nearby suddenly fell down. When the male lead went to check it out, he found a catgirl entangled by a tree demon. He heard the girl's continuous cries for help. The male protagonist also tried to rescue her, but after bouncing a few times, he realized he couldn't reach her. Unsurprisingly, he was also tied up. However, the male protagonist didn't seem to mind. After all, he was looking for a way to die. Seeing this, the cat-eared girl gave up struggling, because the death tree demon before them had the ability to absorb life. In less than 2.5 minutes, they would be sucked dry. They wouldn't be able to wait for anyone else to save them. Hearing this, the male protagonist felt very good, and asked if the girl was also excited. Just as the catgirl was completely dumbfounded, the male lead also comfortably yawned. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the toxins in the male lead's body were also sucked out by the tree demon. Seeing this, the tree demon also realized something was wrong. However, it was too late. The tree demon was unable to retract its actions and instantly poisoned to death by the toxin. The rescued catgirl was indeed quite dumbfounded by this. Just as she was confused, the male lead woke up at that moment. Seeing this scene, now, how could she not understand that he had saved her? She thought he had deliberately let himself be captured by the tree demon, then using his own poison to kill the tree demon. Realizing the other person was a wolf in sheep's clothing, this also made the cat-eared girl reconsider the male lead. However, what she didn't know was this was actually the male lead's 5th suicide attempt. As usual, he survived again. Looking at the other's face, etched with a story of hardship, the cat-eared girl couldn't help but feel sympathy. Although she didn't know why he was so downcast. He was, after all, her savior. So, to express her gratitude, she immediately wanted to invite him to her house. But just as she was about to take his hand, seeing the red string, he seemed to suddenly remember something. Memories of his suicide pact with his girlfriend flooded his mind. Could it be that Ozaki has also come to this world? And it seems that it was precisely this moment that gave the male protagonist a reason to live. That is, to find Ozaki from this world, and then complete the unfinished business with her. So, to find out about her whereabouts, the male protagonist simply returned to the church to ask the goddess about Ozaki's news. Meanwhile, the goddess is praying for the male lead, hoping he will survive and that they will meet again. But unexpectedly, as soon as she finished speaking, the door behind her opened. When she turned around, she found that the male lead had returned. Seeing this, the goddess was overjoyed. Just as she excitedly ran towards the male lead, she saw the cat-eared girl behind him. Unfortunately, even the goddess had no clue about Ozaki's whereabouts. So the cat-eared girl suggested they go to the town ahead and look. But just as she took the male lead's hand, she was interrupted by the goddess who had caught up. While the two were arguing about this, the male lead also found something good here. Unexpectedly, there's a coffin here. He's feeling very dizzy right now. He can use this to get a good sleep. Let's wake him up when we reach the town. Then, several people finally arrived at their next destination. The first thing the goddess did upon reaching the town was to take the male lead to meet the local king. After learning that the male lead is a time-traveling hero, the king generously allowed them to stay overnight in the palace bedrooms. Of course, this wasn't a free stay. The condition was that the male lead would tell them about his adventures. Seeing the situation turning sour, the goddess, seizing upon the princess's beauty, quickly smoothed things over. And it was at this point that the king suddenly remembered that he wanted to discuss something with everyone. It's about whom the princess should marry. One is Gomez, the brave warrior, and the other is Otto, the singing poet of love. Since the king is now old, he must find a husband for the princess as soon as possible. But he still can't make up his mind. So he came to ask the hero for his opinion. But just as he was about to let the male lead choose between two options, unexpectedly, the male lead chose a third answer. And seeing that the male lead acted as if nothing happened, the goddess and the cat girl hurriedly apologized for his rudeness. Fortunately, the king was broad-minded. Considering that the male lead was a time traveler, he didn't take it to heart. But unbeknownst to him, his words stirred the princess beside him. Later that night, the sleepless male protagonist gazed out the window when the goddess suddenly woke up. She asked him why he was still awake so late. Upon learning that he was used to it, it only made her even more curious. Who is this Ozaki the male lead mentioned earlier? Who is this Xiaoqi the male lead mentioned earlier? Before he could answer, a cat's tail emerged from the male lead's bed. Seeing that he couldn't stay in the dorm, the male lead decided to go for a walk. He then coincidentally ran into the princess, who was also unable to sleep. Seeing this scene, the male lead not only wanted to drown himself, but the princess was not at ease upon hearing this. Although she knew he seemed troubled, she didn't expect him to be suicidal. However, the male lead felt that compared to himself, the princess seemed to have even greater worries. It turned out she still couldn't decide about what happened during the day. Although Gomez hasn't been at this castle long, he's one of the most reliable soldiers. Similarly, Otto is her childhood sweetheart. Whenever she's feeling down, he always writes poems and sings songs for her, so she doesn't know what to do. Then, the next morning, the princess finally decided on her husband, just as everyone was anticipating the choice. Unexpectedly, the princess chose to be with the male lead. This stunned everyone. Even the goddess fainted on the spot. It turned out that after a night of inner struggle, the princess suddenly realized something. That is, although Otto would write poems and sing songs for her when she was feeling down, but even when she wasn't feeling down, he would sing. It was noisy until last night. So Otto just wanted to show others his new song. Gomez's problem is even more serious. She doesn't know why, but she always feels a foul smell on him, so she can't accept it. And more importantly, she herself doesn't want to get married. Why no one listened to her opinion? In the end, no one considered her feelings, except for this newly arrived gentleman. Hearing this, the male lead also understood her reason for wanting to die with him. However, at that moment, Gomez beside him suddenly took off his helmet. It turned out that this person was actually a disguised demon army officer. His purpose was to marry the princess, become king, and then offer this country to the demon lord. But unexpectedly, he was discovered by the princess, and the soldiers rushed towards the Minotaur at this time. But he was, after all, a demon army officer, not something that a few small fries can handle. Fortunately, at the critical moment, the cat-eared girl also decided to stop standing idly by. She planned to personally deal with this big oaf. Just as the Minotaur was about to attack, unexpectedly, the male protagonist stopped him at that moment, and told him that if he wanted to kill, can he kill him first? Both he and the princess were longing for death. The Minotaur had never heard such a request in his life, so he decided to kill them both first. Then he would kill the king. Finally, he would burn the town, completely destroying the country. However, at that critical moment, the goddess woke up just in time and cast a shield over the male lead. As the one responsible for summoning the male lead to this world, she would never let him die easily. After teaming up to defeat the Minotaur, the two briefly shook hands in reconciliation. Seeing this scene, Otto decided to turn their friendship into a poem. Today's events made the king deeply aware of his mistakes. So, to make amends for his failings as a king and even as a father, the king decided to pass the throne to the princess. He wanted her to protect the country instead. This male lead is so bizarre. He dares to drink poison. He gulped it down in one go. And afterwards, he said, "Not bad." The boss was speechless at his slick move. He thought the other guy was trying to scam him. It turned out that not long ago, the goddess and the cat girl were, as usual, dragging the male lead to other churches to look for the male lead's girlfriend. A huge dragon suddenly descended from the sky. It blocked their path. Seeing this shocked them both. After all, this was the strongest monster on the surface. How could it appear here? Just as they were feeling bewildered, a cloaked woman suddenly appeared, and slowly walked towards the dragon. She quickly calmed the raging dragon. Seeing her ability, the goddess and the cat girl became curious about the girl's identity. However, the girl didn't respond, only warning them that many monsters were nearby. So she urged them to leave quickly. After all, there were already dead bodies behind them. But before the words left his mouth, the male lead lifted the coffin lid. Seeing this, the two quickly explained, saying he was a transferer with a somewhat eccentric personality. However, upon hearing that the male lead was a transferer, the girl's friendly demeanor vanished. She then revealed her true nature, intending to kill them all. After speaking, a terrifying magical power began to assault the three main characters. With just a point of her finger, the girl fired a powerful laser beam. Although the goddess activated her light shield in time, it still couldn't withstand the girl's attack. This astonishing power left the two of them in disbelief. As the opponent pressed their attack relentlessly, the goddess and the cat girl wanted to stand up and continue fighting to the end, saying they would protect the male lead no matter what. However, the girl's next action was just a glance. That invisible pressure instantly rendered the two immobile. After seeing the mark on the other's neck, the goddess finally understood that the other person was actually a demon lord. No wonder she changed her personality so drastically after hearing about the transfer. After all, this is to eliminate future troubles. Just as the two were feeling despair, the male lead finally stepped forward. He came before the girl and asked her to kill him, and to spare them both. Anyway, he was prepared to die regardless. Hearing this, the girl decided to grant his wish. Then, with one claw, she pierced the male lead's chest. After seeing that the other person had no vital signs, the girl also intended to leave. Meanwhile, the goddess and the cat girl fainted from exhaustion. They passed out. They didn't expect that at this moment, a miracle happened. The male lead actually stood up again. He told the girl. Actually, he'd considered stabbing others before. But in the end, he only went as far as sending threatening letters. And the reason he's saying all this now is because he noticed the girl had very sad eyes. So he wanted to hear what had happened to her. Hearing this, the girl thought she'd met a fool. So she quickly summoned her dragon to leave. Seeing the situation was dire, the goddess familiar hurriedly sent the unconscious people to the second church. So, under the all-night treatment of the local priest, Isha successfully saved their lives. But unexpectedly, the first thing the male protagonist did after recovering was to go to the market and buy a bottle of poison. He drank it down, and it was clear the male lead had fully recovered. The goddess also asked Isha about Ozaki's whereabouts, but he had never heard of him. However, more than that, as a friend, Isha was more worried about his health. Quitting his job without reason to work as a priest was one thing. More importantly, why would you travel with a transferer? You should know that not a single otherworlder is decent. They call the divine gifts used to vanquish the demon lord cheat skills. Without exception, they're all scum who use them for selfish gain. But the goddess doesn't seem to think so, because the male lead is different from others. Without the male lead, she wouldn't be who she is now. Unsurprisingly, the male lead is the one who changed her destiny. And seeing her best friend already hopelessly in love, she knew she couldn't dissuade her anymore. So she changed the subject and asked the male lead what kind of divine gift he had awakened. After all, only with sufficient strength can he protect the team from being completely wiped out. But upon hearing that the male lead didn't have any skills, she was somewhat surprised. However, even more surprising was that her best friend said the male lead had saved them from the Demon King. This instantly made her mind short-circuit, because the Demon Lord was eliminated 7 days ago by another transferer. While the goddess was somewhat shocked, at that moment, the Demon Lord's castle had already been occupied by these transferers. Although the Demon Lord was dead, the transferers left behind the Demon Lord's pet dragon. After learning of this, the cat-eared girl is also happy that the world has finally welcomed peace. But the question is, who was the girl they met before? And 7 days ago, wasn't that the day the male lead appeared? Just as they were wondering about this, the male lead on this side finally broke down. It turns out the male lead now wants to write a work about another world, but for some reason, he's completely out of inspiration. Hearing this, the goddess said he could write some stories about meeting her. But the male lead felt that would be too bland, so he didn't write it. He didn't know why either. When he met the previous girl, he clearly still had a strong creative urge. The male lead hoped that something would stimulate him. But just staying here and doing nothing isn't a solution. The goddess then suggested going out for some fresh air. So, to prevent the male lead from running off, the goddess personally put a heavy suit of armor on him. They planned to buy some things on the street. And after some time had passed, Isha, passing by the room, suddenly noticed something unusual. Why are the children surrounding a suit of armor? But she found the male lead inside. Although she didn't know what he was up to, she also had something to say to him. She hoped he would disband his team with her best friend. Because that girl has always been so naive, she's in danger of easily believing others. If she stays with a transferer, she'll definitely become unhappy. As a good friend, she would never stand idly by. Hearing this, the male lead didn't want to say much, only giving a silent smile. Because whether or not to follow him was the other person's choice, and didn't need anyone else to interfere. And it was at this time, a surprise guest suddenly appeared on the street. He announced that the demon lord had been completely defeated by the transferers. And seeing the people below cheering enthusiastically, the blonde-haired man immediately got to the point. The world is at peace now. This is thanks to the transferers risking their lives. Therefore, from now on, the world is entering a new era ruled by the transferers. Or rather, the glorious age of the great heroes. A man merely touched the elf priestess's head. The next second, her consciousness was instantly corrupted. Then, her eyes began to turn black. And this is the blonde man's exclusive skill. Any creature he touches, without exception, will become his slave. And the simpler the goal, the faster the effect takes hold. Seeing this, the cat girl nearby immediately grabbed the fat man, asking what they had done to the goddess. However, at that moment, a hand grabbed her head. Then, under the effect of the skill, she too became the blonde's slave. Seeing the hero so carelessly abusing his powers, the priestess who had once guided the blonde-haired man stepped forward. She didn't recall ever teaching him to use his abilities like this. Hearing this, the blonde-haired man didn't bother with her. Since you're unwilling to cooperate, then I'll destroy everything first. And then create a new world. He then ordered his pet to charge towards the residence. The controlled cat girl was also frantically attacking the male protagonist encased in armor. The male protagonist, though unaware of what was happening, was quite shocked. Annette was right. You never know when you'll be attacked. Just as he was feeling rather pensive, the cat-eared girl was knocked unconscious by her own bouncing helmet. Seeing she was no longer moving, the male protagonist decided to place her in a cage marked "Beware of Wild Cats. Shepherd, watch out." But just moments after he put her inside, Isha was flung against the wall. Seeing this, the male lead also greeted the other party, wondering what happened here. Hearing this, Isha didn't explain much. She just thought that the transferer's true nature was hard to change. Originally, when the blonde guy first arrived in this world, he was still an honest person, but unexpectedly, since learning about the skill system, he suddenly changed. Like he was a completely different person. At these words, the male lead also became interested in the blonde-haired man's story. Maybe the other party can inspire his long-depleted inspiration. So he decided to visit the blonde-haired man at the church, intending to create a work based on him. Isha felt helpless about this, but she was also willing to go with him. After all, she knew the male lead didn't have any skills. So facing the blonde guy alone was tantamount to suicide. Just as she was about to ask the male lead what his battle plan was, unexpectedly, the male lead suddenly pulled out a vial of poison and drank it down in one gulp. Helpless, she could only follow the male lead and charge straight in. Upon learning that the other party intended to use him as a prototype for a novel, the blonde-haired man still thought the male protagonist intended to portray him as a hero who saves the world. However, the male protagonist was only interested in the other party's experience of succumbing to desires and falling from grace after obtaining immense power, and that very real humanity. Hearing this, the blonde-haired man finally understood, so he decided to charge the male lead with insulting a hero and execute him. Having said that, he ordered his pet to attack. Seeing that the male lead was still taking notes, Isha was speechless. She pushed the male lead away and helped him fight the demonic wolf. But unfortunately, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. Seeing that the other side has no protection now, the blonde-haired man immediately ordered his nearby demonic wolves to attack the male lead. However, at this critical moment, a helmet appeared just in time and blocked the attack for the male lead. It turns out that it was Annette's familiar. However, he never imagined that the male lead actually had a powerful poison within him. Soon, the giant wolf was instantly killed due to severe poisoning. Even though the blonde's pets had all been eliminated, he still didn't intend to give up, because he still had one last trump card. That's right, it was the controlled Annette. Then the blonde-haired man gave her a short knife. He told her to kill the male lead and the other person. Facing her controlled friend, Isha found it difficult to strike, so she suggested a temporary retreat. But the male lead didn't feel the same way, because in his eyes, Annette was definitely not as vulnerable as she seemed. She is not a caged bird to be slaughtered at will. Just as she was about to attack, Annette unexpectedly plunged the dagger into her own thigh. She forcibly broke free from the blonde's absolute control. This also completely panicked the blonde. He didn't expect his cheating skill to fail. Seeing the situation was hopeless, the blonde-haired man tried to take his short knife to end his own life, but the male protagonist stopped him in time. Suicide won't do, because his work wasn't finished yet. If he were to leave the stage alone, it would leave him quite confused. Before his reincarnation, the blonde-haired man is also a person of bitter fate. He is bullied by his classmates every day. He has thought countless times about dying, but he didn't have the courage to do it. Until one evening, on his way home from school, he accidentally ran into a truck. When he came to his senses, he had already arrived in another world. After learning that he had been chosen to be a hero, he also tried the skills of this world for the first time. However, this wasn't important. He discovered that he could control any creature. So, from then on, the yellow-haired man became unstoppable. As long as he encountered anyone who dared to provoke him, he would turn them all into his slaves. He was always looked down upon in his original world. Now that he had finally gained power, how could he possibly save a strange world? After hearing the blonde's story, the male protagonist showed a satisfied smile for the first time in a long time. This was his first work in this different world. Then he snapped back to reality. The blonde-haired man has been sent back to his original world by the male protagonist. Meanwhile, Annette discovers that the male protagonist's panel seems to have a new skill, writing, but it quickly disappears. It turns out this refers to a special skill for a limited target, and that target is the transferer. The male protagonist is preparing to confront the transferer that appeared in this world. Realizing this also made Isha somewhat change her opinion of the male lead. On the other side, in the town, the controlled monsters had returned to normal. At the same time, the cat girl also woke up. Afterwards, Isha, to thank the male lead for his help, specially made him a new coffin. This male lead is so bizarre. After being transported to another world, he thinks about killing himself every day. So when he was faced with someone pointing a bow and arrow at him, he wasn't scared at all. Instead, he even asked them to aim better. It turned out that not long ago, Annette and the cat girl just brought the male lead to a small town. They were stopped by a boy named Nia. He saw them pulling a coffin. He thought they were endangered during their journey, so he wanted to introduce them to a transfer dispatch service. As the name suggests, is for teams who lack confidence in their abilities to take a transfer with them. This ensures safety during the journey. And most importantly, it's cheap. Now, for only 40,000 yuan, he can introduce a powerful transporter to 2 people. A truly powerful transporter, and one personally guaranteed by him. Hearing this, the cat-eared girl was speechless. After all, she had just recently experienced the yellow hair incident. Just as she was about to refuse, Annette was unexpectedly moved. Seeing that Annette had already fallen for it, Nia felt sorry for the person in the coffin. After all, if they had met earlier, he might not have lost his life. However, as soon as she finished speaking, the cat girl quickly explained that this was also a transferer. Nia refused to believe it. After all, what kind of hero looks like they're about to die? After pocketing Annette's money, he left immediately. He said the transfer would arrive at the inn in 2.5 hours. Just as Nia thought he could finally escape the coffin-carrying duty, they have to wait until evening and they still haven't seen the transferer Nia mentioned. Then the male lead said that child wouldn't come, because he has the same look in his eyes as an adult. And what he said was indeed correct. After learning about this, the innkeeper immediately told everyone they had been tricked. Nia is a well-known braggart in the village. Don't even mention knowing the hero. I've never even met him. Hearing this, Annette almost fainted. So, Nia was an orphan since childhood. Therefore, no one ever disciplined him. Although the villagers disliked him, most felt pity for him. The hero is truly non-existent. If he is truly so great, why didn't it save that child? Meanwhile, Nia was cleaning his spoils of war. But just then, a cloth covered his face. When he woke up again, he discovers 3 people dividing up his property. To this, Nia declares that if anything happens to him, his transfer companions will not let you go. However, hearing this, the 3 laughed, because they are the very transfer companions he spoke of. And the reason they targeted Nia is because he constantly uses their names to swindle and deceive others. So for the bad children, as heroes, of course they must carry out righteous punishment. They started the countdown. Just as the crossbow bolts were about to be fired, the male lead appeared in the nick of time. He changed their direction. causing the arrows to strike the steel man's leg instead. At this time, the green-eyed man checked the male lead's attributes. They found that the opponent was also a transferer. But strangely, this guy not only has no skills, but is also poisoned. And more importantly, his HP is only 1. Hearing this, their leader breathed a sigh of relief. So, as punishment for obstructing them, they decided to kill the man before them. Upon hearing someone wanted to kill him, he became increasingly excited, while his health also steadily increased. The next day, as Annette and the catgirl prepared to take the male protagonist with them, they found he seemed to be sleep-deprived, so she wanted to ask what the reason was. But the male lead didn't respond much. Just as Annette thought it was related to a woman, a voice came from behind. Turning around, she found it was Nia, the braggart. Seeing this, the cat-eared girl quickly tried to get her money back from him. Thus, Nia joined the male lead's group. On the other hand, the priests in charge of receiving the transfers. A meeting was also held in the center of the church. The meeting had one piece of good news and one piece of bad news. The good news is that the demon lord has been defeated by the heroes. Therefore, the Pope decided to seal the magic circle that connects to the other world, and will no longer summon transfers in the future. But the bad news is the 7 heroes who defeated the demon lord have now occupied the demon lord's territory. They have become the new rulers of that land, and they declare they will use their power to transform the whole world into their ideal world. In other words, the 7 heroes have become the new demon lords. This is what happened. The Pope is deeply distressed by this. After all, he firmly believes the transferees are angels sent to save the world. But now they've become fallen angels threatening the world. Therefore, the top priority is to find a way to deal with these fallen heroes. Hearing this, Isha immediately thought of the male lead's ability. Perhaps he can turn these transferees and send them back to their original world. And with these words, the Pope, who had remained hidden until now, also emerged. He was very interested in the male protagonist Isha mentioned. He wanted the other party to explain the details. At the same time, the 7 heroes who occupied the Demon King's castle has already sent out 5 people. But surprisingly, one of the 7 people is actually the male lead's target, Ozaki. However, the male lead is completely unaware of this. As for them, they have finally arrived at the cat-eared girl's hometown, Green City. And so, they were locked up in prison. But strangely, only the cat girl was taken elsewhere. Could it be that she's actually a criminal of this country? So they were implicated. And thinking about this, Nia became increasingly panicked. He didn't want to just wait to die. So he quickly pried open the prison door. Seeing this scene, the male lead quickly told Nia to lock the door, because he hasn't experienced the punishments here yet. Nia was also speechless about this. Logically speaking, shouldn't he be praised? However, at that moment, the noise attracted the guards' attention. Thus, before the 3 of them could escape, they were captured again. They were then brought before the local king for questioning. Regarding the kidnapping of their own princess, the ministers believed that they should be sentenced to death. Hearing this, Annette panicked instantly. While they were wondering when they themselves kidnapped the princess, the catgirl appeared at this moment. Seeing her attire, Annette immediately understood. So it turns out the catgirl, Maki, is a princess of this country. So she wants to plead with the king to release these people. Hearing this, the king said it wasn't impossible, on the condition that from now on, you stop doing foolish things, and act like a proper royal. Then he agreed to release them. Maki was reluctant, but for now, to protect the main characters, she had no choice but to accept the king's request. After leaving the palace, they went to a restaurant to eat. Meanwhile, the male lead, having escaped the death penalty, began to wildly consume medicine. Annette, because of the cat girl's identity as princess, felt fear. Thinking back on her usual arguments with her, she was feeling a little flustered about this. A waiter nearby overheard their conversation. Upon learning that they were friends of the princess, the waiter quickly stated that she had once served as a lady-in-waiting to the princess. So she wanted to ask them how the princess was doing recently. After hearing that the princess had been forcibly taken back to the palace by the king, she also seemed a little unsatisfied. Seeing this, the male lead immediately became interested. He really wanted to know what had happened to Maki before. During their first meeting, she was trapped by a tree demon, her body restricted. However, this time, she was imprisoned in the castle by her father. Such an interesting woman. He naturally couldn't miss this. Meanwhile, Maki was gazing at the moon, missing the others. But just then, she suddenly saw someone standing on a rooftop in the distance. As she was puzzled by this, a giant mouth appeared out of nowhere and bit a large hole in the palace roof. When the king heard the commotion and rushed over, he found a red-haired man sitting on the throne. And he was one of the 7 heroes who conquered the demon lord. But rather than a hero, nowadays people seem to prefer calling him the gluttonous fallen angel. As for why he came here, it was to devour this country completely. Hearing this, the king's soldiers began to fidget. This is Wu Kingdom. How could they allow such arrogance? They charged towards the red-haired man. Hearing this, the red-haired man simply snapped his fingers. Seeing this, the king understood that the visitor was not friendly. Then he dismissed everyone. As the king of this country, naturally, he would handle this personally. Then assumed a fighting stance. Seeing that his opponent was the king of the country, the red-haired man immediately became interested. So he decided to exchange a few blows with him first. Just right. I'd like to see how a martial arts-focused nation differs. The redhead patiently explained his skills in response. If a normal person had used that move just now, they would have likely perished instantly. But luckily, he's very tough. After all, he ate quite a few golems a few days ago. As the name suggests, he gets stronger by consuming things. Hearing this, the king didn't want to waste any more words with him. He immediately removed the weight from his hands. He planned to unleash his strongest ultimate attack with one punch. But just as he was about to make his move, Maki, arriving late, interrupted the two. Seeing this, it also excited the red-haired man. He finally saw a delicious woman. At this time, Maki also recognized the red-haired man as the person from the rooftop earlier. Just as she was about to join the battle, the king ordered her to retreat immediately, because she simply couldn't replace Leo. Hearing this, Maki was plunged into painful memories. At the same time, the male lead also learned about the princess's past. It turned out Maki had a twin brother, Leo. Originally, the king had always groomed Leo as his heir. But 10 years ago, on a stormy night, due to a landslide on their way back to the castle, Leo and the queen suddenly passed away. Since then, the king has been depressed. So, to help her father recover, Maki decided to cut her hair and take Leo's place. She thought this would get my father's attention. But it backfired. This created a deep rift between us. Although the king saved Maki at a crucial moment, he lost an arm because of it. After seeing the finger the redhead mentioned, Maki lost her mind. As she charged towards the redhead, suddenly, a minister appeared and knocked out Maki, then fled the scene. Seeing this, the red-haired one didn't bother chasing. After all, he wanted to save the main course for last. Now, he was thinking about how to deal with this situation. Meanwhile, the male lead and his group had just left the restaurant after hearing the story. They saw the minister carrying Maki towards this place. Before anyone could figure out what was happening, a tremendous sound came from the palace. They saw the king tied up, knelt before everyone. Then the redhead began his oath. He declared himself the new king of the country. But upon becoming king, he only had one request. That is, let him taste all the sub-races living here. He'll try them all. Of course, only women and children. The men should just do their jobs, that's all. Now everyone finally realizes the seriousness of the situation. It's too late for them to escape. Because now, the city gates were already guarded by his men. When Maki woke up again, she found herself lying in the minister's house. Then she went downstairs and saw the male lead and the others were all there. She heard that the red-haired man had already occupied the palace and kidnapped the king. Maki's first reaction was to rush over, but everyone stopped her. After all, that's an existence that even the king couldn't defeat. Just she going alone is tantamount to suicide. Even so, they have to do something. Hearing this, Annette said she could leave it to them, although she didn't see it at the time. But they have a secret strategy to defeat the transferers. So, they quickly arrived at the palace gates. The red and blue guards were stationed here. Seeing this, Annette was about to attack, but the male protagonist stopped her, because they came here specifically to be eaten. The new king's speech deeply moved him. Before, he had been contemplating various methods of death, but he never imagined a way to die by being eaten. So he wanted the red and blue buffs to inform the new king, saying that the one who wants to be eaten is coming from under the city. Hearing this, the red and blue buffs fell into deep thought for a moment. Although they knew there were perverts in the world, they never thought it would be to this extent. On the other side, just as the minister was about to give Maki the medicine, he found the room completely empty. And it goes without saying that Maki must have gone to seek revenge on Red Hair. Seeing such high-quality prey deliver themselves, Red Hair would naturally savor the moment. But before that, he decided to give her a surprise first. After kicking the blue buff away again, he instantly arrived in front of Maki. It was only then that Redhead remembered to introduce this cheat skill he had in this other world. The weak and the strong. Depending on the meat he eats, he can obtain various abilities. He can even use the skills possessed by that meat. In other words, the Redhead plans to use the other person's hand to dismember her and then savor her slowly. On the other hand, the male lead and his companions, having successfully escaped prison, also arrived at the princess's room. Annette was a little dumbfounded by this, not understanding why the male lead brought them here. But the male lead didn't explain much. He just had Nia use a wire to pry open the locked cabinet. Then, upon seeing the diary in the drawer, the male lead also smiled with relief. At the same time, Maki was about to be overwhelmed, faced with the red-haired man's fierce attack. At this moment, she was completely defenseless. It could even be said that it was a one-sided crushing defeat. But even so, she still stood up. Because she understood, if it were her deceased brother, Leo, he absolutely would not have given up either. Seeing this, the red-haired man became even more excited. Because his favorite food is the meat that is full of vitality. Only this way allows him to feel that he's still alive. One could say that the wasted days of his past life were all for today. It turns out that in his previous world the redhead was troubled by being too rich. Although he enjoys top-tier treatment every day, it leaves him feeling empty inside. So, seeking thrills, he conceived an evil plan. But thankfully, this was stopped in time. Ultimately, his parents helped him clean up this mess. Although people say he is the happiest man in the world. But Redhead doesn't think so. In his opinion, even a beggar on the street is happier than him. Therefore, he is the unhappiest man in the world. Just as he was thinking this, suddenly a truck appeared. And so it happened. He also, by a twist of fate, became the hero of this world. Since arriving in this world, he not only found his heart fulfilled, but he could even eat whatever he wanted. And it was at this time that the red-haired discovered he couldn't move his mouth. This had never happened before. Could it be that he was instinctively refusing to eat this person? Just as he felt strange about this, Annette and Nia also surrounded the red-haired man, urging the male protagonist to quickly activate his pen of judgment skill to banish the fallen hero before them from this world. Hearing this, the male protagonist immediately refused, because someone who self-deprecatingly calls himself unfortunate is simply not worth writing about. These words, once spoken, Red Hair instantly flew into a rage. He should know he's the predator. Then he prepared to activate his ability and devour them all. However, the male protagonist didn't pay any attention to this. He simply came to Maki's side and handed her the notebook. After opening it, the notebook automatically transformed into individual sheets of paper. They surrounded Maki. It records everything about her past. During the family tragedy she cut her hair to help her father regain his strength. He even acted like her brother. But unfortunately, her feelings weren't understood. Instead, it only made things worse between her and her father. Over time she'll even lose sight of her true self. But even so her deceased mother already showed her the way. The answer is in this diary. And after the male lead's heartfelt speech Maki finally found her true self. The king beside her also recognized it as the beast god's mark. It turns out that Maki awakened the beast god's mark long before her brother passed away. Maki awakened the beast god's mark. Originally, her brother intended to tell their father this good news. But Maki refused. Because she knew her father opposed her martial arts training. How could he possibly be happy to know? After realizing he had stifled his daughter's talent, the king finally realized his mistake. After the others successfully defeated the red-haired man, Maki fainted from exhaustion. However, just as Annette was preparing to treat her wounds, the red-haired man's body suddenly began to mutate and he stood up. Seeing this, everyone was surprised. The newly awakened redhead was also shocked. But on second thought, it turned out that before he defeated the Demon King, he had secretly eaten a piece of the dead Demon King's flesh. After realizing this, the redhead felt that it was fortunate. He thought the heavens were on his side. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the one approaching turned out to be the little girl from before. The male lead immediately greeted her, but this startled her, because she clearly remembered that she had already killed him. Then, the next day arrived. The male lead and his companions prepared to leave the country. Unfortunately, Maki didn't go back. Instead, she prepared to follow her father's previous wishes and be a good princess. However, after what happened last night, her father finally understood. He allowed his daughter to travel anywhere. It's not too late to return here after everything else is over. Immediately after resuming their journey, they arrived at the World Tree of Sapbel. According to Annette, this tree has the ability to bestow blessings upon travelers. Therefore, to ensure the safety of their upcoming journey, she suggested visiting the village at the foot of the World Tree to see if they could receive a blessing. However, when everyone finally arrived at the village at the foot of the tree, they discovered a gambling house had opened at the village entrance. Seeing the words on it, he didn't need to think. It was certainly the work of those transferers again. But compared to that, the protagonist discovered a more serious problem. That is, his sleeping pills were all gone. Just as the protagonist was about to find a tree to hang himself, Annette also suggested that they go to the village chief to find out what's going on. After telling the male lead not to eat the stones on the ground, they arrived at the village chief's house. But this inquiry was not in vain. Those who had been transferred not only opened a casino in the village, but even the leaves of the World Tree were made into drugs by them. Because of this, the World Tree began to weaken day by day, until it withered. The village chief firmly believed that this must be a sigh of despair from the World Tree's spirit, so he asked if they could save the village. Hearing this, the male protagonist said that before that, could they please restore his sleeping pills to their original state? After all, he's out of sleeping pills. He's really going to be distraught. However, at that moment, a blond man in armor walked over. Without saying a word, he accepted the village chief's request. It turned out that this person was also a transferer. But unlike other transferers, he genuinely wanted world peace. To do this, they must start by saving this village. Seeing this, Annette was also somewhat surprised. She didn't expect there to be kind transferers. Just as she was about to call the male lead and the blonde-haired one to save the village, she discovered the male lead was already gone. It turns out that because he hadn't taken sleeping pills for a long time, the male protagonist already felt that his body and mind were getting healthier. Just as he was thinking about what to do, he unexpectedly discovered a smoking cave. Then, as he went to take a look, he found that inside were people who had fallen. At this sight, this was exactly the place the protagonist was seeking. Just as he was about to join them, a woman stopped him. She said she could take him to a happier place. And soon, the male lead was taken to a bar by the woman. Seeing how much he could drink, the woman tried to dissuade him. But the male lead said he was drinking himself to death, because he had lost something important. Thinking that he would become healthy in body and mind, he couldn't sleep at night. And upon learning that the other person was also a tragic figure, the woman spontaneously decided to dance for the man. While Annette was grieving over the man's disappearance, the woman returned with the sleeping man. Seeing this, Annette was instantly furious. She quickly wanted to ask who the woman was and what she had done to the man. She didn't pay much attention to the woman. She simply stated that she was only there to deliver someone. After the other person left, the village chief let out a long sigh. Another person has been ruined. The woman from earlier was named Aishia. She was the most hated traitor in the village. Therefore, the villagers called her a witch. The cause of the incident started when the transferers first established the casino. At first, the villagers, due to their lack of power, could only submit. But Aishia was different. She was the only one who would try to please those fallen transferers. She even opened a bar next to the casino for that purpose to lure the transferers. Originally, the villagers saw that she lived on the edge of the village, and her background was unknown, so they felt sorry for her and didn't interfere. Now, unexpectedly, she's turned out to be a terrible swindler. Hearing this, the blonde man also believed the village chief's words and said he would definitely bring justice to that witch. Seeing this, the village chief also affirmed the blonde man, saying that he was the true hero. However, these words, while they might fool the blonde guy, couldn't deceive the male protagonist who was pretending to be asleep nearby. So, the next morning, the male protagonist prepared to go to Aishia's bar again. Seeing this, Annette wanted to stop him, but the blonde guy thought that was impossible, because the male protagonist had already been charmed by the witch. But don't worry, if we eliminate the evil forces in the village, then he will surely come to his senses. Meanwhile, after the male protagonist arrived at the tavern, he also thanked Aishia. Thanks to her dance last night, he temporarily forgot the pain of his life. It was like a beautiful dream. Hearing this, Aishia also felt that the male lead was somewhat different, so she offered her blessings. In this painful life, she has the protection of the world tree spirit. The male lead was a little confused after hearing this. It turned out that this village actually had another legend. When the spirits of the world tree danced down, the wishes of the weak and the sick would be fulfilled. Saying that, Aishia also asked the male lead to try making a wish. Perhaps his painful life would become a little easier. But the male lead just smiled, because compared to him, isn't it you who needs redemption more? From last night's beautiful dance, the male lead saw that it was filled with sorrow. Just as Aishia was about to deny it, suddenly, a transferer who opened a casino barged in. Seeing this, Aishia quickly went to prepare drinks. And it was at this time the casino people began to teach a lesson to those who lost at the casino. After warning these people, the man also left. Lately, the casino's revenue has decreased significantly. The boss said not to worry. They can also get the villagers involved. It turns out their casino is currently only open to the relocated people. If they get the villagers involved, they'll definitely make a huge profit. Hearing this, Aishia quickly stepped forward to persuade them. Didn't we agree not to harm the villagers? Besides, she's been paying protection money on time. But the boss doesn't care about that. Saying this, he prepared to send his men to grab some villagers. Seeing this, Aishia wanted to stop them, but was violently thrown aside by the man. After understanding the whole story, the male lead immediately comforted Aishia. In his world, a woman like her wouldn't be called a witch. On the contrary, she'd be praised as a fairy. His words immediately made Aishia blush. But just then, there was a sudden shaking outside the house. When everyone went out to see what happened, they found that their casino had been torn to pieces by the blonde man. Seeing this, the people at the gambling den were instantly furious. They immediately decided to kill the blonde man but were all defeated by him. So, after successfully driving away the evil forces, the blonde man naturally became the village hero. However, while praising him, the villagers saw the witch, Aishia, right before their eyes. Their faces changed instantly. Everyone became hostile towards her. Although the blonde hero tried to persuade them, the villagers' hatred for the witch Aishia remained undiminished. Everyone wanted this traitor to get out of this village. But as the situation spiraled out of control, the male protagonist stepped forward, saying, "Is this how you treat someone who fought alone, protecting this village? If it weren't for her secretly suppressing these evil forces, this village would have long since fallen victim. Therefore, Aishia is the true hero of this village. Those who should feel shame are you people who threw stones at her." However, the agitated villagers wouldn't believe such words at this time. They all thought the male lead was bewitched by the witch, so he was talking nonsense. Seeing this, Aishia also told the male lead not to explain anymore, because under the current circumstances, perhaps leaving is the best choice. Then, after leaving an apology, she left without looking back. Seeing the witch eliminated, the villagers showed smug smiles. After witnessing all this, the blonde man showed an expression of disbelief. After waiting for the male lead and his companions to leave the village chief approached the blonde man. It turns out they heard that the transferers made a lot of money selling world tree leaves, so they also wanted to take over the business. They wanted to start their own business. Now that the evildoers are gone, and with the world tree, it will surely revive again. The world tree will surely revive and bring blessings to the village. So the village chief wants the blonde man to be the village's bodyguard when there are fallen transferers and evil sorceresses disturbing them. Please, hero, be sure to carry out righteous punishment on them. Meanwhile, after leaving the village, the male protagonist and his companions suddenly discovered that the world tree was beginning to wither. It was weakening faster than ever before. Before they could figure out what was happening, a bright light appeared behind the male lead. This male lead is too bizarre. Just because he ate a lethal dose of sleeping pills, it gave him a body immune to all poisons. Even when stung by a desert scorpion, he didn't get poisoned at all. Even the toxins in his body ended up poisoning the scorpion to death. It's simply unbelievable. Not long ago, in order to reach the next church faster, the main character and the others arrived at a desert area. Thinking they could take a shortcut, they instead got lost. Annette and Maki were racking their brains. How should we get out of here? Nia, however, smugly told them that he grew up in this desert. Therefore, he was quite familiar with the terrain here. The two were somewhat surprised by this. And the first point to surviving in the desert is to travel during the day. Because although it's cooler at night, many thieves and monsters also appear at this time. So daytime is relatively safer. However, before he could finish, a group of desert bandits riding scorpions suddenly appeared. This surprised the three of them. Why aren't these people playing by the rules? And upon realizing that these people were also transferers, Annette and Maki immediately had the male lead hide in the coffin. They would handle things from there. Seeing that these two women were so capable in fighting, the man with the pompadour immediately targeted the seemingly frail male lead. Since Annette and Maki were already engaged, only Nia could protect the male lead at this moment. But he was just a little kid, not even as tall as a wheel. How could he possibly be a match for Plainhead? He doesn't even dare draw his sword. Seeing the other's cowardly demeanor, Plainhead became even more arrogant and overbearing. He told Nia to think carefully. Drawing your sword means you're ready to die. If you're careless and get stung by his poisonous scorpion, you'll absolutely die a painful death within an hour. However, hearing this, the male protagonist immediately became excited. He asked if he could try first. Seeing the male lead wanted to die so carelessly, the Plainhead immediately wanted to draw his sword to avenge it. But unexpectedly, at that moment, a loud wolf howl from afar interrupted his spellcasting. After realizing that the desert's dominant werewolf appeared, Plainhead instantly lost his nerve, then ordered his subordinates to retreat. After they left, Annette began to treat the male lead's wounds. Meanwhile, Nia felt guilty for his earlier fear. Seeing this, Maki quickly told him not to worry about it. After all, he's still young. It's quite normal for him to act like this. Afterwards, Nia led the main character and his companions to an orphanage. This was where he grew up. Seeing his child make friends, the director immediately prepared a sumptuous meal to entertain them. And as for why they were able to find it in the resource-scarce desert, it must be attributed to a kind person who donated food to them. Although they really wanted to thank that person, he never showed his face. And speaking of which, the blonde-haired child suddenly asked Nia a question. Didn't you say you wouldn't return here until you became a hero? Since you're here now, does that mean you've become a hero? With those words, Nia felt a little guilty. In a sense, he really was a member of the heroes. After all, he joined the heroes team. And after dinner, night fell. Seeing this, the headmaster quickly locked the house door. Because werewolves come out at night. So, if you don't want to die, never go out at night. However, our male lead wouldn't listen to any of this. Upon hearing of a chance to die, he naturally wanted to try it. But before he found a wolf, he discovered an interesting scene. Meanwhile, Nia also woke up at that time. And coincidentally, as soon as he woke up, he saw a dark shadow in the courtyard. So, out of curiosity, he picked up his sword and went outside. He wanted to see who it was, but as soon as he went out, he bumped into the person. And after seeing the vegetables in the other person's basket, Nia immediately understood. This person was the kind person who delivered food, so he helped pick up the vegetables that had fallen on the ground. While asking why the other party refused to show their face, the man didn't want to reveal too much in response. He only said that just seeing the children's smiles was already enough for him. Then they started talking about various dreams. This way, we can bring honor to everyone at the orphanage. But unfortunately, even now, he still doesn't have the courage to draw his sword. Once this was said, the man was also moved by Nia's words. He believed that Nia would definitely become a brave warrior in the future. Soon, they talked until the next morning. As the man was about to leave, Nia wanted to invite him to have breakfast together. By the way, he can also thank everyone with him. But the man refused, because supporting everyone from the shadows is enough. Hearing this, Nia understood his thoughts. Then he wanted to ask if he still had time. Then the scene changed. They came to the place where the man harvested vegetables. It turns out it's because he has trouble with his legs. So Nia wanted to help them with these things. And with Nia's help, the orphanage received a lot more food than usual. After finishing all this, Nia, exhausted, quickly fell asleep. But just as he had fallen asleep, the robbers from earlier came looking for the male lead. Originally, the biker gang leader only wanted to collect protection money, but he didn't expect the main character and his group to be there. So he decided to settle old and new scores together. He planned to avenge his dead scorpion mount. Then he ordered his men to charge at them. Meanwhile, Nia was already too scared to move. While he was hesitating, the man from earlier also ran over and grabbed Nia, then took him to a safe place. Seeing Nia hating his own weakness and incompetence, the man seemed to feel a bit of resonance. Then he let out a long sigh, as if he had made up his mind. Then after transforming into a werewolf, the man also joined the fight. He intended to kill all the thieves threatening the orphanage. He planned to kill them all. However, upon seeing this, Nia found it difficult to accept. Because this wasn't the outcome he wanted to see. He unconsciously drew his sword, and rushed forward to block the man's attack. Although he doesn't know what happened to him in the past, he knows very well that if he continue killing like this, the gentle him will never return. However, at this moment, the man, consumed by killing, didn't bother to talk to him. When the man regained his senses, he could only reveal his past filled with regret. It turned out that long before he time traveled, the man was both disabled and an orphan. He thought he would be alone until his death. But unexpectedly, one day, the appearance of a boy completely changed his outlook on life. Not only did the boy help him get rid of the bullies, but he was also very willing to be his friend. He was very willing to be his friend. This was the first time in his life he felt kindness from others. But unfortunately, it didn't last. Soon, the boy was retaliated against by those thugs. After witnessing all this, the disabled boy could do nothing. He could only watch his friend being bullied by those thugs. Unable to accept reality, the man chose to run away. And it was at this moment that a truck suddenly appeared and brought him here. But even in another world, he still couldn't forget what happened that day. If only his legs had worked back then, could he have saved him? After hearing these words, the male lead scoffed at the man's explanation. In his opinion, the other party was simply looking for a convenient excuse. Is your leg really the reason you can't help him? Hearing this, Nia asked the male lead to stop. Not everyone is born strong, and he understood the other's pain best, because he himself was a weak, lying coward. But even so, he's also trying his best to change himself. So he begs the male lead not to blame him anymore. And the man calls out to Nia at this time. He says she's not a coward, because when he lost control just now, it was Nia who stepped forward and stopped him from transforming into a wolf. This prevented him from committing a greater mistake. So he wants Nia to cheer up. After all, you've become a brave warrior. In contrast, he's the one full of excuses, a coward. The man never imagined that he was merely releasing a tornado on the battlefield, but it unexpectedly blew out the coffin. What surprised him even more was that there seemed to be someone from the coffin. They then welcomed the male protagonist and his group inside. And coincidentally, Annette never expected to run into Isha here. They had originally gotten lost in the desert, but unexpectedly, the male protagonist was swept away by a tornado. By the time they caught up, they had already arrived here. It's a good thing he's been in the coffin all this time. Otherwise, he would have definitely suffered serious injuries again. However, the male protagonist felt unlucky about this. Because of the tornado, now he's lost his comfortable bed. At this time, Wolf from the third church also came over. He apologized for accidentally injuring the male protagonist earlier, and the male protagonist told him to reflect on his actions. Why didn't he kill him? But then again, he's also glad he could experience a new near-death experience. So the male lead is thankful for that. Hearing this, Wolf didn't understand what the male lead was saying. But he still hoped that the male lead would consider this his mistake. After all, they are currently at war. And speaking of which, Isha finally remembered to explain. It turned out the Dwarven Kingdom was at war with one of the 7 fallen angels. Upon hearing this, Maki immediately stood up excitedly, because she had just defeated one not long ago. However, Wolf expressed his disbelief. How did you know the other party was a fallen angel? Even if they might be in a weakened state. Seeing the other party underestimate her, Maki immediately brought up the male lead. She mentioned his ability, saying, his ability can send transferers back to their original world. Hearing this, Wolf had already heard of this matter. Although the Pope also expressed interest in his abilities, but Wolf still felt they didn't need such power, because these were meaningless in the face of his magic. He left without looking back. After he left, Isha also said Wolf indeed has the strength to say so. After all, he is one of the strongest storm wizards in this world. Even the 7 fallen angels cannot directly confront his magic and wisdom. Meanwhile, in the Demon King's castle, a man in black armor decided to personally attack the Dwarf Kingdom tomorrow. But the steward thought it was unnecessary, because he has already sent someone who knows storm witches very well. Meanwhile, the male protagonist, who was taking a stroll, suddenly discovered an interesting scene. He saw Wolf being surrounded by a group of girls confessing their love to him. However, he remained unmoved. Seeing this piqued the male protagonist's interest, so he followed. But it doesn't matter if he doesn't go. The male protagonist discovers that Wolf, such a playboy, seems to be pursuing someone he likes as well. But the other party doesn't seem willing to meet him. It feels impolite to listen any longer, so the male protagonist also left. The next day, the dwarf soldier discovered the enemy appeared on the hill on the other side. Hearing this, Maki and the others wanted to help, but the dwarf king refused them, because how could he let his guests fight? He would personally go to the battlefield and drive back the fallen angels. Having said that, he went to the battlefield with Wolf. The outside of the city instantly fell into a chaos. As the dwarves and the demon army fought fiercely, suddenly a giant dragon flew over from a distance. Its mere breath changed the entire situation. Isha then recognized it as the Demon King's former mount. She didn't expect the fallen angels to have subdued even this. However, Wolf told her not to panic. Just a little dragon. He had dealt with dozens before. But at this moment, the Dwarf King discovered the man on the dragon's head isn't the armored man from before. Then the greedy girl activates her ability and ties up Wolf. Seeing this, Isha wanted to stop her. But the next second, she felt completely weak. The girl told her not to worry. She just wants to talk to Wolf. Then flew away on the dragon. But seeing the situation was getting bad, Isha hurriedly ordered the Dwarf King to retreat, and then told everyone that Wolf had been captured. At these words, everyone was in disbelief. The strongest storm wizard was captured. Following the direction the girl flew, Isha guessed they most likely went to the Delhi 10 Cathedral. The Dwarven King also stated that the army is now in complete chaos. With the red snow falling, it won't be long before the Dwarven Kingdom is trampled by the demon army. So, to resolve this immediate crisis, the protagonist needs to understand Wolf's past. He then went alone to the small dilapidated house from last night. Perhaps the person Wolf loved knows something. However, he never imagined the person Wolf loved was actually an old man. On the other hand, Isha also speculated that the girl might be Wolf's student. It turns out he used to really enjoy training transfers. But one day he suddenly stopped. And he started drinking heavily and giving up. Now it seems very likely that it's related to that girl. She doesn't care what happens. Their main priority now is rescuing Wolf. But because the Dwarf Kingdom currently has no extra soldiers to deploy, the responsibility of saving Wolf falls to the main characters and their group. Speaking of the main character, they only then discovered he wasn't there. Where's the teacher? Then, the next morning, the male lead and the others wore Dwarf Kingdom equipment and prepared to depart. Although the other three's equipment was ready, the male lead's desired item hadn't arrived yet. And there was one more, even more important problem. That's how they'd cross this desert. They'd be exhausted by the time they got there. Just as they were beginning to worry, the thief leader, Airplane Head, suddenly emerged from the ground. They thought he was there to fight again. But Airplane Head quickly explained that he was there to help. Ever since Nia saved his life, he had turned over a new leaf. Now he not only drives a bus company during the day, but also looks after an orphanage at night. Hearing that he actually protects the orphanage, Nia was a little surprised. But more than that, what kind of thing is a bus anyway? The girl never expected that she herself had even time-traveled to another world. My annoying little sister actually followed me here. You know, in the previous world, I barely went to school because I had to take care of her illness. She longed to go to school, though. Later, I secretly went to my graduation ceremony, leaving her home alone. I didn't expect that action nearly killed her. Because her younger sister was home alone and her illness relapsed, almost resulting in her death. Her father slapped her hard because of it, blaming her for not taking good care of her sister and running out to play. Dejected, she wandered onto the street, and then was transported to this other world by a large truck. Here, a priest taught her magic, and she no longer has to constantly care for her seriously ill sister. And the priest would occasionally take her out for walks. She came to love this other world very much. However, these good days didn't last long. Soon after, her younger sister also arrived in this other world. Then her priest teacher stopped paying attention to her. No matter how hard she practiced magic, she couldn't get her priest teacher's attention. That day, the girl's magic improved again. She hurriedly wanted to tell the priest teacher, but saw him praising her sister as a hero who could defeat the demon lord. He had been waiting for such a person to appear. This caused the girl to completely turn dark. At this moment, she suddenly awakened her own dark magic. The power of darkness surged forward like a tide. Then she released magic, devouring her own sister. Watching her priest teacher suffer and thinking of her sister again, the girl also shed black tears. But she left the church to join the 7-person team to slay the demon king. This time, the 7-person squad is dealing with this priest, so they sent the girl. She brought her priest teacher to this church. The girl wants her priest teacher to see how her magic blossomed and bore fruit. Meanwhile, the cat girl and the others also arrived here to rescue Father Wolf, who was captured by the girl. Seeing the church guards lying at the entrance, they confirmed that Father Wolf had been brought here. When they opened the door and went inside, they saw the girl and the suspended wolf. Maki and the others questioned the girl, asking who she was. They asked why she had taken Wolf. The girl said her name was Yuriko. She said that now she's called the Greedy Fallen Angel. She came from another world. She had once been taught by Wolf in this church. She didn't want Maki and the others to interrupt her feud with Wolf. As she spoke, she cast a spell and summoned a group of soldiers from the ground. Giving them no time to react, the skeleton soldiers attacked. Wolf told the girl not to do that, but she said Wolf had taught her don't back down in front of the enemy. This left him with a bitter expression. Isha asked the girl, Wolf must have been a good teacher. You have no reason to hate him. The girl used to be kind, but ever since she killed her own sister, her dark powers have been unleashed. The girl felt she was no longer human. Only endless depravity remained. She spoke as she concentrated her dark power. Behind her manifested a deathly embodiment. Wolf, suspended in mid-air, urged Catwoman and the others to quickly flee. But the girl wanted to kill everyone here. So she had the deathly embodiment wield the scythe of death. Just at this critical moment, the male lead arrived. He drove his car through the wall behind the church. The male lead went straight to the girl. Looking at her, he said, "You two really do resemble each other." And his familiar spirit carried the old woman in. The old woman's arrival surprised both Wolf and the girl. The male lead then said he has finished writing the story of the girl's sister. Now it's your turn. This surprised Catwoman and the others. The old woman and the girl are sisters. The old woman recounted how the girl cared for her during her serious illness. Even though she loved reading, she didn't have time to go to school. However, the girl summoned soldiers again. Tell them to stop. The girl's sister also spoke up, telling her to stop. But the girl felt she was no longer kind, and she hated her sister. Because her sister stole her youth. So she came into this world happily. But since her sister, once again took everything from her, now she's greedy. Her sister can no longer stand in her way. She will get everything she wants. The male lead beside her asks the girl, "So, what do you want?" This instantly enrages the girl. She swings her scythe at him. At the critical moment, Wolf pushes the male lead away. He blocked the attack himself. But the male lead blamed Wolf and told him not to interfere. Then he walked towards the girl again. Let them continue. Actually, the girl just wanted more attention. But this greedy desire almost killed his sister in the previous world. The world is like this too. The girl felt she wasn't a loving sister. She was both greedy and ugly. Saying this, the girl burst into tears. The male lead comforted the girl. No one in this world doesn't want to be like this. He told the girl again that she wasn't greedy. She was still a kind girl. She's just a little clumsy. The girl next to her, her sister lunged forward and hugged her. Then the male lead asked the girl, "Do you know why your sister was summoned here?" Because in a world without her sister, she lost hope. Even though she's become an old woman now. She came here just to see you again. And her younger sister came into this world asking the wolf priest to make her strong, then give her older sister a free life. Because in her previous world, she took her older sister's life. So she hopes her sister will be happy in this world. At this moment, the male lead activated his anti-time travel skill. Wolf Priest, who had never seen this skill before, was momentarily stunned. The male lead tore off a page. In an instant, the girl's dark persona appeared like a ghost. Then it disappeared just as quickly. Simultaneously, the girl's sister also returned to her original appearance. Those who were hurt by the girl's dark power also all returned to normal. This bizarre male lead finally saw his long-lost girlfriend in another world from Billy, and the first thing he did was to grab her and try to make her jump off a building. But in the Pope's eyes, he is a savior, because the time travelers summoned by their church is to send these time travelers back to their original world. Not long ago, he sent a pair of sisters back. Just as they were happily preparing to return to the Dwarven Kingdom, another time traveler crashed through the church roof. He's one of the 7 who once defeated the Demon Lord, a melancholic fallen angel. Because the previous greedy fallen angel failed, he's here to end it all. Because of his student, Wolf, unable to act, seeing this, felt it was his time to shine. So he stepped forward and unleashed a devastating storm attack on the melancholic fallen angel, and he didn't forget to show off to his teammates. However, his magic had no effect on his armor. And the desert bandits also tried to ambush him from behind. He wanted to turn the melancholy fallen angel into a bus, but he failed as well. And the Catwoman, who had once defeated a fallen angel, also bravely continuously attacked by several people. This melancholic fallen angel is also going to fight back. Repelling this fallen angel so easily, Nia looked dumbfounded. The Catgirl even happily hugged him. The others also came up to praise him. But on the other side, Wolf and Isha were not in high spirits. The two of them were reflecting. But this had nothing to do with the male protagonist. He brought his own to confess to Wolf's familiar. The helpless male protagonist. However, his invitation was cruelly rejected. Ozaki thought he had changed a lot. She saw a light in his eyes. It seemed full of life, completely unlike the person she knew before. But he felt he hadn't changed. He was still the same him. Just then, the Catwoman and the others were brought by the familiars. They thought something had happened. Ozaki saw this scene. She felt that the male lead had found something more beautiful than death, so she couldn't be with him anymore. She left without looking back. The male lead tried to stop her, but it was no use. The Catgirl and the others also knew that this was the person the male lead was looking for on this trip. The next day arrived. Several of them came to thank the master weaponsmith who had crafted their weapons. At this time, Nia also took the opportunity to take out his own greatsword and show it to the master. He himself wasn't very strong, though, but he can shatter the fallen angel's sword, so he found it strange. The weapons master opened it and told Nia, this sword was too luxurious for him. But one day he could become worthy of wielding this sword. And at that moment, the male lead activated the coffin chariot. The weapons master beside him said, the coffin chariot's engine is still adjusting. If you don't control it properly, you'll be killed. But the male protagonist intended to do just that. He wanted to be killed. So he immediately started the coffin chariot and sped off. The Catwoman and the others chased after him. Seeing the male protagonist driving towards the castle gates, the Catgirl took the lead. She also didn't forget to call for Annette and the others to follow. Previously, in the Demon King's castle, Ozaki and the melancholy fallen angel have returned. Of the 7 who defeated the Demon King, only 5 remain. The Catgirl and the others have already lost sight of the male protagonist. Not only that, they didn't know where they were. A villager passing by kindly told them safety. The villagers told them not to worry. There are 3 trials inside. If he can't pass them, the male protagonist can't get in. So far, only the hero received the Fairy King. The male protagonist who passed the trial was sucked into a beam of light. Then he landed on a pair of snow-white breasts. The Fairy King told the male protagonist that he was the second human to arrive here. The male protagonist thought he had arrived in paradise. At this time, 2 little fairies appeared behind the male protagonist. They told the male lead that this was the Fairy King's land. One of the little fairies told the male lead to get off the queen's chest immediately, but the male lead had just drugged her with sleeping pills. He was also patting around on the fairy queen's chest. This angered the little fairy, who wanted to kill the male lead on the spot. The Fairy King magnanimously told them to forget it. Then she told the male lead, she is the Fairy King. She can grant blessings to those who reach this place. The fairies long for peace. Those who receive her blessing must fulfill their dreams. But she first makes the male protagonist choose. If he wants to save the world, should he believe in the hearts of others, or possess absolute power himself? But the male lead is still grieving over Ozaki leaving him. So this time, he must die. This angered the little vixen behind him. She told the male lead to choose carefully. However, the male lead simply lay down and gave up. Saving the world? Don't be ridiculous. He's had enough. He's lost Ozaki. He doesn't care about world peace anymore. The male lead's apathy makes the 2 little fairies wonder if they chose the wrong person. Even the Fairy King is unsure. But the male lead is a world tree spirit. A person protected by Aishia. Aishia, so honest and earnest, how could she choose such a man? So the fairy king asked the male lead what blessing he received from Aisha. The male lead said Aisha made his sleeping pills infinite. Saying this, he poured some sleeping pills onto the fairy king's chest, asking her if she wanted some. This made the little fairy so angry she wanted to kill the male lead right then and there, and make the fairy king hurry up and send this useless male lead away. But the fairy king told the two little fairies that the hero who came here before failed to bring peace to this world. Now the world is even more chaotic. There are elves calling themselves the All-Seeing Eye, and 7 ferocious individuals who claim to have defeated the Demon King. There are countless time travelers. This makes the world's good and evil extremely blurry and unclear. This is no longer a place where simply having an upright heart can lead to making the right choices. So he believes the male protagonist's arrival here is definitely not a mistake, but rather, the current world has guided him here. In the end, the final fairy king bestowed a blessing upon the male lead, and told him that he would meet his destined woman at the end of his journey, and that she wouldn't ask him to save the world again, but hoped he would live a little longer and continue his travels. The male lead understood. The fairy king wanted him to cheer up. He stood up and thanked her. Then the fairy king gave the male lead another flute, telling him that if he encountered difficulties, the fairies would help him. Then he sent the male lead away. Outside, Annette and the others were anxiously waiting for the male lead, but they also thought that even if the male lead returned, does he still have plans to continue traveling? The person he was looking for has already left him. Annette doesn't think it will end like this. The male lead then fell from the sky. He landed precisely on the statue. Seeing the male lead lying on the ground, Annette was very worried. The male lead sat up and told them not to worry. Just then, that enthusiastic villager appeared again. He scolded the male lead for turning the statue into that state. Seeing this, the male lead immediately picked up his flute and began to play. That little sprite who harbored ill will towards the male lead, appeared before them. This made her directly sigh. How could she be here? The male lead then asked her if she could help him restore the statue. The little sprite was just about to say why she should help the male lead when the sprite king projected herself before her. She then understood. The fairy king said she would lend a helping hand to the hero, referring to her. The fairy king nodded affirmatively, and told her to do her best. Then she disappeared. This angered her again. She declared she would kill the male lead next time. And so on. The male lead and his companions had already set off again on their journey.